The tribalistic narratives in crypto have always sort of lent themselves to all or nothing thinking. Won't you all be sorry when Bitcoin is the only money that matters? What about if Ethereum becomes the only money that matters? What about Cardano becoming the only money that anyone wants to use? But what if crypto more generally represents a shift from societies largely using singular monies to using plural monies? If you're not down with this plurality of money stuff and you only dream of greenbacks and ADA, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. So, what do I mean with this whole plurality of money thing? What are we talking about here? Plural monies. Well, today, it was Samuel. I don't know if he wants to be identified by his actual Twitter handle, but we'll just say Samuel sent me an interesting interview. It was an interview of a very controversial figure. And I won't sidetrack the conversation by telling you exactly who it is, but someone who has his entire career been very, very controversial, someone outside of crypto. He's completely controversial for non-crypto reasons, but he was asked about crypto, and the intent was to sort of get him to talk about the reasons he hates CBDCs, I think. But he said something kind of interesting. He sort of thinks about crypto purely in terms of decentralization. He said he doesn't want CBDCs, for all the same reasons I think all of us in crypto would fear CBDCs, all of the centralized control, all of the surveillance capitalism, all of those things that we fear would go along with the CBDC. This person also feared those things. When asked what crypto he would prefer, I don't even think he was asked. I think he would just volunteer this information. But he said, "Hey, Bitcoin's fine, but I don't want just Bitcoin. I want a plurality of monies. I want a whole bunch of monies because I want it to be decentralized. I want us to have as many possible forms of money to use as possible because every time we end up with something very decentralized, there are shenanigans basically. It's always corrupted. There's always, things like he doesn't talk about this, but I'm sure he's thinking of things like, inflation of the money supply to pay off government debts, to devalue government debts to make them easier to pay off, theoretically at least. All of these kinds of things that aren't necessarily in the favor of the average person. The average member of society doesn't necessarily um, benefit from those things, but the people at the center do. And then he talked about all the surveillance that could go along with something like a CBDC. And, we do see surveillance right now just with our legacy fiat currencies. Certainly the whole AML KYC regime comes to mind. There's a lot of surveillance that goes with a centralized currency. And this particular person dreamed of a future where we don't have a dominant Bitcoin, we don't have a dominant Ethereum, we don't have a dominant ADA. None of the different cryptocurrencies sort of envelop the world and bring on this, sort of utopia that, fervent enthusiasts of each of those ecosystems would dream of. You don't have a whole world adoption of a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or a Cardano or an Avalanche, or a Polkadot or an XRP. Uh, Instead, all of these cryptocurrencies flourish. Maybe hundreds of different cryptocurrencies flourish. Maybe individual corporations all have their own money. Maybe there's a Tesla money. Maybe there's a Volkswagen money, a Toyota money, a Nissan money, whatever, an Apple money, a Google money. Maybe we allow for this plurality of monies, and each of those different, ecosystems could have their own monetary policy. They could have their own reason for being. They could, have different detriments and benefits for people, using those monies and those different ecosystems. It's a little bit different take than we often see in crypto. Certainly, this is something we've talked about in crypto. It's very similar to sort of the layerverse idea that a lot of different ecosystems have sort of adopted. You could have different layers for different things, have different pluses and minuses in different categories, different trade-offs among the three legs of the blockchain trilemma, all those kind of things. We could have the same thing with the actual currencies. We could have a flourishing Bitcoin, a flourishing XRP. The XRP army could flourish. We could have very healthy, flourishing ADA, Ethereum, Polkadot, Avalanche, VeChain, whatever cryptocurrency you're into. Maybe there's a future where they all just continue to flourish. Nobody really takes over. We just have these different sort of, individual ecosystems, and we can have all of the interoperability you want. They can be just as interoperable as, the euro and the yen and the dollar. Uh, you can go back and forth all you want, but we have these individual monies. Maybe we really don't need just one money to take over. Certainly, I think a lot of people in crypto would sort of agree with the ideal that we get a future where we get to at least experiment with a separation of not just church and state, but also money and state. I think this is one of the founding principles of crypto. I think Satoshi's white paper, you know, taken at its ethos, you could say, is an attempt to create a separation of state and money. And of course, when Satoshi was writing the white paper, he was thinking just about Bitcoin. I don't think Satoshi knew the extent to which Bitcoin itself will flourish, let alone, this sort of, whole spectrum of thousands of different cryptocurrencies that we see today. But I think the separation of state and money was always one of the founding principles of crypto, that maybe we'd do a lot better if we had a strict, well-defined monetary policy that doesn't just sort of fluctuate whenever the central bank decides it needs to devalue the currency. And the idea was always, in the early days when I first got into crypto, in maybe that 2013, 2014 period. I think I was actually in 2012, but 2013, 2014 seemed to get really busy. The idea was always, what if Bitcoin could just replace all the fiat currencies? That sounded great at the time, but maybe that's impossible. I think at this point it would be difficult to imagine a world where Bitcoin could technologically progress enough to actually serve as a world currency. And in fact, the most ardent Bitcoin enthusiasts no longer even talk about Bitcoin as a currency. They talk about it as a store of value. And then along come all the other coins. But I think it almost seems more likely at this point that we don't end up with one coin dominating the world, at least at first. The course of history often does lead to centralization, but at least at first, it seems like we might go through an era where we have this plurality of money. And I'm using that in the sense of the monies being plural, not a plurality in the sense that we think about it in terms of elections and things like that and voting. But what if we do end up with just a million different little ecosystems? And, this is not sort of, I think, in keeping with our preferences in crypto, but what if we do end up with a whole bunch of different company monies? What if it's sort of like going back to the days of sort of wildcat banking and company towns and that kind of thing? And there's certainly negatives or detriments that go along with those, but I think it's very possible that we could end up with, a Tesla crypto and a Toyota crypto and an Apple crypto and a Google crypto. And if you're like me, you probably won't engage too much with those types of centralized cryptocurrencies, but it seems like we could be headed to a future that looks something like that. Those being in contrast to the future that we're certainly going to see that involves a lot of CBDCs too. I think all of the nation states are going to push their own CBDCs. We've heard for years now that every single central bank in the world is at least looking into CBDCs, and the big ones, the big powerful central banks, are all deep, deep in the development of central bank digital currencies. But if regulation keeps kind of going in the direction it's going, if we keep seeing this fluctuation back and forth between regimes in all the big nation states that favor or do not favor crypto, it seems like there'll be room for as many cryptocurrencies to continue rising as we have in the past. We might just end up in this sort of, fractured world. Maybe interoperability changes that, but this fractured world where we have a huge number of monies to choose from. And while that's not necessarily the original vision of crypto, sort of Bitcoin taking over the world, maybe it's just as good. For years now, there have been people in the Cardano ecosystem who've been crying about the role played by IOHK and Charles in the ecosystem. They've been discontent. They want IOHK and Charles to give up the reins of Cardano faster than it was happening. And for years, I've also been saying that a lot of those people would regret that when IOHK no longer feels responsible for the ecosystem and we're no longer getting all the free work we've been getting out of them. If you remember, clear back in 2017, 2018, the whole story was IOHK was going to continue developing the ecosystem for a certain amount of time. We were going to continue getting that free work for a short amount of time. What was it, like 2 years or something? There was like a date. I think it was like 2020. In 2020, we were going to have another election and decide if we were going to rehire IOHK to continue developing the ecosystem. What actually happened? We just continued getting free work. We never rehired them. We just continued getting all the free work. And let's face it, was there really anyone in the world who could have done an equivalent job for, any amount of money? People will argue this point, but I would argue that no other group was really in the same position. You could name certain other development teams in our ecosystem, and each of those certainly have their own partisans, people who would argue that they could do as good a job as IOHK, all those kinds of things. But IOHK did it for free. I would argue that nobody really understands Cardano as well as IOHK. Certainly back in 2020, that was the case. But they did it for free. They've been working for us for free. They've been rolling things out for free all along. We've gotten all this free work over Cardano, and now that's changing. Look at this. Look at this post. What a weekend. All core Cardano repos are now migrated over to Intersect. This ecosystem is growing steadily. Remember the days when most of the repo was just a wallet? We've come a long way, fam, since, but that's just the beginning. Thank you for being here all along. So, the Cardano code repositories are now going over to Intersect, which is the members based organization. And sure, we know a little bit about Intersect, but I don't know if the average person in the Cardano ecosystem could really tell you very much about Intersect at all. I'm not implying that there's anything bad about Intersect or anything nefarious or anything like that. I'm just saying things are changing in pretty big ways. And I don't think it's entirely clear to everybody how big these changes are. I think a lot of people are going to sleep on this, not realizing the transformation we're undergoing. But those days of getting all of this free development work out of IOHK, I think we're going to miss those days. I'm not saying that IOHK is disappearing or that IOHK is walking away from the ecosystem or anything crazy like that. I'm sure they'll be around for a long, long time, but things are definitely changing. And I think pretty soon people are going to realize just how much free work we got out of IOHK when all that free work is gone, or at least a lot of it's gone. But on the other hand, we are a much more mature ecosystem now. And we're seeing other changes that are very, very positive. Like, look at this Cardano Foundation, new product launch. Who's used to the Cardano Foundation launching products? This is not really something we're used to. They say introducing the identity wallet developed by the Cardano Foundation. I didn't see this coming. Maybe some of you knew about this, but I didn't see this coming. A W3C compatible mobile wallet that manages self sovereign identities across Cardano and other blockchain networks. Key benefits: supports multiple identity and credential standards, securely managed digital assets, seamless interact with dApps on Cardano, lowers entry barriers for new users, interoperability across ecosystems, integrates key event receipt infrastructure carry for enhanced interoperability. And then they give you a website to check it out. But look at this. This is a full on product launch of an SSI wallet, a self sovereign identity wallet. This is a pretty big move forward for the ecosystem to see the Cardano Foundation launching things. and to see an identity wallet actually launch. Because we've had Atala Prism sort of as a product of IOHK for a long time, but and there were like little demos you could download on the Atala Prism website, but we haven't seen anything like this, an open source identity wallet for the ecosystem that just kind of lives in the ecosystem. There is this additional interesting bit of information that Stake with Pride is describing here. Stake with Pride says, looks like it has interoperability with the Open Wallet Foundation, which has a lot of sponsors, including Visa and Google. So this is interesting. This is interesting. We have emerging possibly an SSI standard for all of crypto, and Cardano already has a DApp that's interoperable with that standard. This is a great move forward. Maybe even more important than what the product actually is, though, is that we're seeing the Cardano Foundation launching products. So this is another sign things are changing in Cardano. We're, maybe going to see less of a central role for IOHK and Charles as planned, but also maybe not even as planned, but as hoped. We're now seeing other entities sort of emerging in the ecosystem as being the ones who will launch these kinds of products we've always been looking forward to. A little check in on Washington. What is happening on Capitol Hill? Well, here you can see the dragon has shed her normal green scales in favor of a plum blazer to introduce her new bill that once again would crack down on crypto. Are you feeling a sense of deja vu? It seems like every single week the dragon is doing something that she characterizes as her very tough crackdown on crypto. But there's a special reason why people are becoming less and less worried about pretty much anything the dragon does. That, of course, is that the dragon is terribly ineffective. I saw various posts, either looking like this or claiming that she once got a bill passed. But if you look at the stats that are reported here, 36 bills in the 2023 to 24 legislation season, zero passed. 103 bills the year before, zero passed. 98 bills the year before, zero passed. 80 bills the year before, zero passed. 27 bills the year before, zero passed. And of course, this is kind of unfair because what we know about Capitol Hill is that it is terribly inefficient, just generally, and it's impossible to get even the most common sense legislation passed. Nearly impossible to get any laws made because things are so polarized between the two parties. So this is even though the dragon is kind of part of the axis of evil between herself, Gensler, and whatever characters are running the executive branch. I have no idea who's actually running the White House, but whoever it is, that's sort of the axis of evil between the three of them for crypto. The ones who are trying to oppress crypto, it's pretty much these three parties. You could argue that Gensler is more like a foot soldier, and you've sort of got the legislative anti-crypto caucus, kind of led by the dragon. And then you've got whoever is pulling the strings in the White House. Don't even know who's running the White House, which is kind of a bizarre thing to say, but this is who we've got. Fortunately, they're just as bad at passing legislation as they are at policy making on crypto. Maybe one of the only good things about a super polarized Washington, D.C. is that if you got your enemies, you've also got your allies. And crypto, we know, certainly does have its allies as well. This post says Representative Sean Casten is struggling to find a co lead for his House version of the controversial Dragon Marshall anti money laundering crypto bill. They might as well just call it the anti crypto bill, with House Financial Services Chair Patrick McHenry instructing his party not to participate. So you might know Patrick McHenry is retiring from Congress. He's not going to seek re-election. He's leaving for whatever reasons. I think it's a little bit tied to McCarthy's departure, but Patrick McHenry is on the way out, and he's still kicking and screaming and fighting tooth and claw for crypto. Crypto has its allies in Congress. In both parties, on both sides of the aisle, we have very strong allies. And without those allies, crypto would be in trouble. Finally, for those of you in Cardano DeFi, this was a very good news week. I think a lot of you would agree with that at least. We saw the launch of Genius Yield. They say we're thrilled to announce the launch of Genius Yield's DEX. I like how they say the Genius Yield's DEX. The Genius Yield's DEX. Try it out now. Got this great graphic. This is certainly a platform that a lot of people have been waiting a long time for. But that's not all. If you're into Cardano DeFi, you already know what comes next, and that's AXO. We finally got dates on the launch for AXO. This post says the countdown to launch begins. It's with much excitement that we finally share dates. The official AXO launch on Cardano, January 16th, 2024 at 12 p.m. GMT. There you go. And there's a dude who is receiving the mathematical blessings of the lambda symbol. Very exciting. This is one of those projects that is at the peak of anticipation. This is one of those projects that has I don't think you could possibly have more people in Cardano holding their breath, waiting for a project than the number right now. We're currently looking forward to the launch of AXO. If you have no idea what AXO is somehow and you're in Cardano, you can go back and listen to an interview I did with Yarek some time ago. We did a big, long interview, talked all about what AXO proposes to bring to the table. This is going to be interesting because this is a project that proposes to be very innovative. And the question is, there are several linked questions here. How much innovation? We know it's going to be an innovative project for Cardano. We know that for sure. The linked questions that are definitely going to be unanswered are these. Is it going to bring How much innovation is it going to bring to crypto decentralized exchanges, DEXs in general? Is it going to bring some new functionality, some new innovation that isn't even present in the legacy financial scene? These are things I hope we're going to find out on January 16th, 2024, when the DEX, when AXO finally launches, when this platform finally launches. There's a huge amount of anticipation building up for the launch of this DEX, and I'm really excited to see what if if Cardano is finally going to have something that really stands out from the rest of crypto DeFi. Because you can look at a lot of the projects we have in DeFi, just generally across every single blockchain ecosystem. And you sort of find cognates for that same platform, very, very similar platforms in other blockchains. And in fact, what happens in a lot of cases is there's some sort of progenitor platform, usually launched in the EVM world, usually in Ethereum. And then somebody in every single blockchain just sort of copies that exact platform and just sort of translates it into a new blockchain ecosystem. And it's usually not, I mean, I should just put it this way. It's often financially rewarding to the people who do that. So I'm not at all blaming them for doing that. But there's also this other great hope that we launch things in Cardano that bring some true innovation, that bring something new and fresh, something the crypto world hasn't seen before. And eventually in crypto, we'd like to bring things that the legacy world hasn't seen before. You could argue that crypto's first invention, blockchain money, was something the legacy world hadn't seen before. You could argue that smart contracts were something that the legacy system hadn't seen before. Proof of stake, you could argue, something that the legacy world hadn't seen before. What's next? What new thing can we bring from Cardano that the legacy world hasn't seen before? I'm confident that's going to happen in Cardano. Maybe it's Axo, maybe it's another platform, but I'm hoping we're going to find out on January 16th. I hope everybody had a great weekend. We are now deep into the cold season in a lot of the northern hemisphere. It's fully that snowy, icy season. People are out skiing and doing all the winter sports stuff. Whether you're in that part of the world, I hope you're out doing fun winter things. If you're in the southern hemisphere and it's summer for you, I hope you're having a great time doing all of the fun summer things. You guys should be like in the heart of summer right now, maybe. I hope you're having a great time doing whatever you're doing and you're starting out a great week. I'll talk to you soon.